Welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. Today we have Dan Trautman of Madison Human Performance. In this episode, we're going to talk everything when it comes to sports performance training, rehab, electrical stimulation, and all kinds of different performance concepts. We would like to give you a heads up and apologize in advance. This is one of our first episodes, and we did have some camera difficulty. The audio is there throughout, but there are some times where we do not have any video going on with it, but we hope you enjoy this episode and check out more at clinicallypress.com. Alright, welcome to this episode of Clinically Pressed. This is on our trip down to Madison as we're hitting up as many people as we can, and today we're starting off with Dan Trautman. Dan is a former UWL football player where I actually got to first meet him. He did his master's degree in human performance at UWL. Is in the process of still trying to figure out PhD. That might be on the outtakes, trying to figure out the loan part of that. Yeah. But now currently owns his own performance center, we'll call it, and that's what we're here to talk about, all the different things he does here and everything with that. So, Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm excited for it. So, I know the biggest one that I wanted to get into is you sent a lot of stuff that you do that's very different than the traditional. So even if you wanted to give a little bit of background, having come up through your football training, through some of the other things you've seen, through internships, kind of like, I don't know, the short version of how you kind of got to where you're at here with some of these different things.
Yeah, you kind of touched on it. I started off at UWL, and really this began before that. In high school, I was always, playing athletics. I played baseball, basketball, football. I quit baseball to run track, to train for football, and that's kind of what started this when I realized how valuable training for sports actually is. And I actually got hurt in high school my senior year. I broke my ankle and I didn't know it. So it was kind of, so I played on it my entire college career.
I've got another story about him hurting something and not doing anything about it.
So that was injury one. And then I went to Minnesota State Mankato my freshman year because I thought I wanted to be a chiropractor. I kind of always knew I wanted to do something health related. And then I didn't really like it there very much, and I wanted to play football and be closer to home, so I transferred to lacrosse. And that's when my focus kind of changed away from chiropractic. I kind of debated sports medicine, and then I realized you could be a strength coach as a living. I was like, holy smokes, that's what I want. So I hit that head on, finished football, gained a few more injuries along the way, patellar tendon tear, 2 meniscus, and hip labrum.
That you played the entire season on, I didn't mention.
Yeah,
that whole thing.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in kind of a mentality of just play through it. It's just a little pain, whatever.
A little dirt on it.
Yeah, exactly. And it didn't. I mean, it hurt, but it didn't hurt that bad to the point where I couldn't move or anything. So, I just assumed it was not a big deal. And then after, training on it year in, year out, my senior year just kind of took a complete downslide as I pulled my hamstring, and it got pulled 3 times that season, and I couldn't figure it out, but it's basically because my back and everything else was spasming so bad. My hamstring was just the last thing to go. So after all that, I got into more of the interning with Kevin Schultz.
Yep.
And he was kind of the first person to bring me along in the strength and conditioning world, which was a great person to have. I mean, he's still to this day one of the smartest guys I know in the field. And then I began grad school with Dr. Glenn Wright, who was very influential for me. He's a very, very scientific mind, and he he was able to train me to think, like we were kind of touching on before, outside of the box, and not just and kind of question everything. Think more of like a scientist and things like that. Not that I'm a scientist, but at least to think like one.
I would love to hear why you think that he outside the box, because he seems to not be so outside the box sometimes. But
yeah, I mean, I just think he has a reason for why he does things, and he's a
true.
very, very smart guy. So I think, sometimes when you get to that kind of level, you kind of form certain opinions that, well, they're probably justified, you know. But then again, I mean, I've always been very open-minded. I have my parents to thank for that, and I guess that's kind of why I've gotten into the things that I'm doing now that kind of seem a little bit off the beaten path a little bit. I interned at Wisconsin with Jim Snyder and Eric Helland, both very, very, very talented coaches. Jim's kind of that crazy Russian scientist type of guy who does this stuff and it just works, and he knows why, and he applies all these different methods, and that just, every day I was learning something. I had interned other places prior to that, and just they did more of the old school way of uh, basically just doing what everyone else does. So they got,
where was that at? I had tried to write it down, but I couldn't remember where
it was at Stanford University.
That's right. Yep.
I
remember.
It was just
G-Dub saying something about that.
I was able to have a Q&A and basically asked, well, why do you do all this stuff? I wanted to know all the scientific reasons or the theory behind it all. And it was just kind of like, well, the answer that I got was, well, basically you just kind of come along through the ranks and you just pick up things and pick people's programs apart and take what you like. And it was just kind of like a casserole of everyone's different ingredients. And I was just kind of like, well, I mean, I get that to some degree, but it just seemed like there was no rhyme or reason or whatever. Going through grad school, that's why I wanted to go to grad school, is to learn the reasons and the adaptations and the mechanisms behind every training modality. And that way, I think, is how you design a program or a therapy program in your case. Well, you can't just guess and say, well, this is what someone else did. You have to understand that mechanisms and everything behind it, so you can organize training accordingly. And then getting out of grad school, ironically, I decided not to become a strength coach. The hours were miserable. As much as I liked Wisconsin, I hated the hours. Not so much that I didn't like to work for 12 hours every day or more. It's just that there's only 24 hours in a day, and that leaves me with, when I grow a little older and have a family, that leaves me with like an hour maybe to see my family, and that's just not worth it for me. So I decided to open this business, and that'll obviously, my girlfriend and my girlfriend's dad both work here. John Murphy's our chiropractor, and Michaela's an ESS major. She graduated.
Make that connection.
Yeah.
Didn't even. Yeah.
Yep. So and he does fascia manipulation and chiropractic work, and she graduated from lacrosse as well. Was doing exercise science, bio minor, and was going to become a physical therapist. And just really wasn't sold on. Didn't really love the day-to-day. She was always talking about food and baking and nutrition and stuff. And I told her, I was like, hey, maybe you should just be a nutritionist. And she's like, no. Like 3 months later, she comes, damn, I figured it out. I'm going to become a dietitian. I'm like, oh my gosh, I told her this like 3 months ago.
That doesn't sound like a conversation I've ever heard you two have.
Yeah. So, I mean, we always kind of joke about that. But she's very good at it. She's enrolled at Madison right now in the dietetics program. And then I think she's going to go on to be get a master's in it as well.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah, it'll kind of be a family business at the end of the day. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this really on the basic level, is just so I can see my family every day, set myself up for kind of the rest of my life, while doing something I'm good at and that I love. Basically, is why I opened this facility.
So we kind of talked about it a little bit before we started. So what are some of the things that make this unique and not just your typical gym or any other kind of fitness facility that you may come across? Yeah. So John, our chiropractor. When I met him, we just clicked. Him and I have very, very similar views on how the body should work and how, from a therapy or a performance standpoint. And we had talked about, opening a place like this up kind of since the day we met each other,
Michaela always gives us a hard time about how she never, gets any attention when we're together. So,
The third wheel.
yeah, exactly. So we're always just kind of chatting about stuff, and when he initially worked on me, and I kind of saw the merit and how much better I felt, and that being said, we kind of try to develop a system, and it's not just a gym, it's not just a PT center, it's all in one essentially. We don't really think that there's like, it's not black and white, there's not like a dividing line. We kind of try to make it a spectrum more so, where like, yes, we get a lot of injured people, or people just in chronic pain, and he has a lot of talent in addressing the fascial, the structural issues behind it, their alignment and things like that. The hardest part for chiropractors, and where I would step in, is I address the nervous system from a training aspect, to retrain proper movement patterns. And one of the unique things we use here is the ARP wave. It stands for Accelerated Recovery and Performance. And really, what it does is it's is a form of direct current, which is unique. Most ESTEM units are alternating current. I don't know how you guys use it. Most times, from what I've understood, it's used to fatigue the muscle so that it relaxes, and then you can do whatever. I don't know how. That's how John would use it. But I'm sure there's a billion different ways.
We take a full 3 weeks just looking at stim waves in class, and
yeah.
At the end of the day, you only really need to know the difference between two of them. But
yeah.
So direct current isn't commonly used, but it is at times.
Sure. And basically, direct current was first used in the Soviet Union with some of their high-level Olympic athletes, and
that's probably why they call the one that we use a lot Russian stim.
Yeah.
Seems to make sense.
Yeah. And really, what they found is direct current actually has regenerative effects on the body. This book you guys might like. It's called Nice.
Interesting.
Yes. The Body Electric is a great book. It talks about injuries and the electromagnetic side of injuries, which is, kind of blows your mind at first, but it really makes sense. And how, if you think about it from an atomic level, everything kind of has its own electromagnetic pole of sorts. And when you get injured, the injury draws the right healing components to that area. It seems a little bit like hooey, but when you get down to it, it makes sense. And what they found, ARPWave, what they found is that the direct current has regenerative effects on injured areas. And to go back to the Russians, the issue they had is that they would apply this to the skin, but it would burn the skin. But they're a little crazy over there, and they didn't really care. They would just train with it, therapy with it, just whatever, suck it up,
deal with it.
Yeah,
Exactly. I thought you were gonna say they had a problem because they kept tearing biceps and stuff, and they were using from the over pharmaceutical use, and this is what they were gonna use to fix it.
Yeah.
So.
No, but they would do this, and the problem is obviously that would never fly here. That'd be like torture, So what ARPWave did was combine two different waveforms and allow it to penetrate the skin without any burning. So you just get all the regenerative and neural and muscular effects. That's kind of how this company back in the 50s or 60s or something like that, ElectroStim was what it was called. They started up. They didn't really know what they had. This guy named Dennis Thompson, who's the creator of ARPWave, he's an exercise physiologist, and he set out to find a modality that would allow him to fix compensation patterns. And he found this place. Okay, that's what I need. They didn't know what they had, so they sold it to him, and he took it over and spent the last 25 years developing protocols for it. For virtually, it's kind of the same protocol, but applied to every different part of the body. It has specific movements and things like that. And it's really interesting because the direct current obviously will help heal the tissue with the regenerative effects, promote blood flow and things like that. The direct current actually has direct effects on the tissue itself, not just a byproduct of blood flow. Secondly, it causes the muscle it allows the muscle to eccentrically contract instead of concentrically contract, which allows the muscle to be in a better position to absorb force, which is what our muscles are designed to do.
Sure.
in general. And the theory is that every injury is caused by the muscular system not absorbing force. Now, obviously, if you get clipped in football and like that's probably not going to prevent everything, but pretty much every chronic.
The non-contact and the
Exactly.
chronic, yeah. The
Exactly.
stuff that you can actually, hopefully, in theory.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, the theory is that the muscle dysfunctioned, and that's due to these hot spots, trigger points,
Yep.
adhesions, whatever you want to call them. And they're areas of either myofascial adhesions or scar tissue inflammation within that muscle. Similar to like when you lift and you get really sore, the muscle actually is partially torn, basically. It's microtrauma. And that doesn't always regenerate completely with healthy tissue. That sometimes regenerates with scar tissue. And similar, if you ever kind of pull a muscle, if you overuse a muscle, it might not completely regenerate perfectly. And over time, you do that same motion over and over, you're just generating more and more scar tissue. And the issue with that, to go back to the body electric now, talking about how the polarity of the injured cells is reversed, well, that interferes with the neuromuscular signaling. So the signal from the nervous system doesn't get sent to the muscle adequately. Essentially, there's interference, and the muscle doesn't get the signal to contract or absorb or create or absorb force properly. So that force either gets taken upon in a compensation pattern using a different muscle nearby, or it gets transmitted directly to the joint. Typically, both things happen.
Right.
And at some point, that joint's just going to wear out, and you're going to have an injury. Well, the ARP wave and its protocols will address the origin of the injury, and once that's cleared up, it allows the joint to heal itself. The direct current helps accelerate the healing, and then on top of it all, it is stimulating the nervous system to actually remember. Basically, it's developing that skill of proper movement yet again. And I think that's a hard part, probably as a therapist, is to get them to move like they did before, or to get the muscle to fire properly. That's got to be the hardest part. You can fix the injury; anybody can do that. But I mean, like when I had my knee surgery, for example, I couldn't fire my VMO. I did a billion different types of E-stem. I did deep tissue. I tried everything. It just wouldn't work, and it was like there was like no mind-body connection, so to speak. I just couldn't figure it out. And then after using this, it's like a second brain. It just kind of overrides that compensation, the inhibition, and reactivates it essentially.
So it allows them to consciously activate it then after treatment?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
Yeah. So then, the idea is that there's like a power level switch on there that you are trying to get up to a certain point. And
we should try that on your hip.
Yeah.
I think that might be the insight. If you can fix his hip, you might have a client for life over there.
No kidding.
Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking right now.
Yeah. Where can we use this?
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I mean, it's used on a lot of professional athletes. Some of the bigger names you'll hear of, like Adrian Peterson. That's how he kind of came back from the ACL so quickly.
I always tell people, how did he come back so quick? Because he literally had everything done perfectly.
Yeah.
His nutrition, this thing, I'm sure he had everything else. That's
He's
why
a
a guy
freak naturally.
that's why a guy can come back in 6 weeks with that when the rest of us, or 6 months, excuse me, not 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put it past them.
Yeah.
Right?
The ageless Larry Fitzgerald uses it. Brandon Marshall just started using it. He was banged up early in his career. He was nagging injuries. Last couple of years, he's been solid. Jay Cutler for the Bears. I know none of us probably really like him too much, but yeah.
Hey, as long as he keeps throwing more passes to the back, we're fine. He can be as healthy as he wants.
But yeah, I think he injured I think it was his groin earlier this offseason. He was supposed to be out for like months. He came back in like 3 weeks, and they even NFL I was watching the game, and they're like, yeah, he's using this ARP treatment, and those guys don't really know, but
weird. They have no idea what's going on medically.
Yeah,
strange.
Yeah. Like it gets mentioned here and there. They just talk about it like, oh, it's just they don't really know much about it. But really, the special thing about it is that they patented this waveform, so no one else can use it. that's the thing. So that's how they set it up, and they initially started off just as like a therapy clinic themselves, and now they realize, well, hey, let's create like a network of practitioners, and that's what we are. So,
sweet.
And then on top of it all, they found that people were coming back faster, stronger, more athletic than they were prior to injury. I'm like, wow, geez, there's something to this, obviously. So they created a separate machine, has a couple different settings that they use for performance training.
Nice.
So that's what we're going to tap into hopefully in the near future.
That was going to be my question, asking, do you use it just mainly for rehab, for injuries then, or do you use it like once someone's performing well, just to kind of increase their performance?
Like I kind of touched on earlier.
Before we get into that, do we want to get everything reset, take the quick break? Because I think we can roll right into all your other performance things
Cool.
with some of the other stuff that you do, and we can go from there.
Sounds good.
Awesome. All right, we're back, and we were just jumping into more of the sports performance side of thing and talking about Art Wave and where you're wanting to go with that. Feel free to continue to elaborate on that, but then I know looking into, and I did some of the research on it, this thought of extreme isometrics, the Michael Yessis 1x20 program, and then your eccentric overload training, which I'm sure feels wonderful when you do it.
Yes, it's awesome. Anyways, back to your question. Really, like we were touching on in the beginning, our clinic is therapy and performance, but it's like a spectrum. It's not just, you're done with therapy, now you're into performance. Really, the arc wave therapy, you get performance adaptations the whole time. So like, from day one, you're starting off and the muscle's going to get bigger and stronger and faster. Really, the speed and the frequency which it's sent at is 500 pulses per second. Which is very, very, it's much more rapid than what we can send, like, from our own physiological, like, capability. So it really, really overloads the muscle. It comes with, like, this eating plan and everything that, you have to ingest a lot more calories because you're working out so much.
Imagine putting this on ASCO.
Oh, my God.
You'd probably
Super
break the
human.
machine.
Yeah.
Not just the eating for how much you already put in there. Could you imagine eating more?
Oh,
Anyway, sorry.
No, yeah. And basically, the muscle's getting a high load, thinking, equivalent to like weight, high velocity, so speed, and high reps, high volume. So it's getting all three components basically of strength training, whereas you would normally have to train them separately. You can't train high speed with a high load and a high volume. It's just impossible. Any kind of attempt to that would certainly lead to injury of some sort or overtraining or something. That's what's very unique, and the best part about it is that it's done in perfect position. So instead of doing sprints or squats or whatever, you might do 3 perfect ones out of your reps that day, and 7 bad ones. Every rep you're getting is perfect. So it's training your body to be in optimum position all the time under an immense amount of stress. So when you go into a game or practice, you're going to default to that perfect position. Now, that's not to say that, you're going to be in an extreme isometric split squat, when you're trying to sprint.
Right,
it's just your body prefers those optimal, length tension relationships and things like that, where it'll kind of revert to the proper positioning rather than a poor position, which will leave you vulnerable to injury. So, from day one, you're getting that stimulus. We focus on more of the hot spot removal, the first portion, and then we try to strengthen up and basically you'll kind of chip away. You'll find the first couple days are more of the superficial, more recent hot spots or compensation patterns that you've adapted, and then you get into more of the deep-rooted ones, and then basically you'll come to a point where you won't find any more new hot spots. You found like the original ones that caused the problem in the first place.
When you're saying hot spots, you're talking just
like
areas of pain. So yeah, when people start feeling different things.
Yeah, like when we're scanning you, we'll start, like say you have a knee injury, we'll start in your knee and you won't feel much, and then we'll run up your quad and it just feels like an intense contraction, and all of a sudden you go over this hot spot. It's an area of scar tissue and inflammation. The lights of it's like, whoa, like it feels like a dagger went into your leg. And basically that's that interference, the electrical interference from damaged tissue. So that's what's not allowing your muscle to function optimally. And we focus on eliminating those. And once we do, we strengthen up the original weak points for the next quarter of the treatment. The last half, you go from a more generalized that's where it starts to kind of fade into more of the performance. So you're strengthening the muscle groups kind of as a whole, not focusing on in particular hot spots. You're focusing on just like kind of the major muscle group type of things. Analogous to where you might be trying to strengthen up someone's like VMO and rehab, but then they go back into performance training and now they're just strengthening the entire leg.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
it's a similar kind of analogy. So then, yeah, once you finish the therapy part of it, you would then go into, you could either, like, if you're just kind of an average Joe and you just want to maintain, you can come back and just do maintenance sessions every so often. Or if you're a serious athlete, that's when you would transition to the ARPWave performance training, which is a few different protocol settings on the machines, but it's still the same concept of establishing proper biomechanics, getting high load, high volume, high load, high volume, and high speed, all in the same workout in the proper position. So yields pretty like good results.
So they looked at like muscle activation patterns when using that. Are you still able to get like to a high percent of maximal voluntary contraction? Things like that.
It's supposed to basically super maximal. So that's kind of the idea behind it. Now, if you're a strict ARPWave, performance training coach, then you would do pretty much solely this, from my understanding. But some people use it as like an additional tool. So they'll still do like their sprints and their squats and everything like normal, and then they'll do this on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
But from my understanding, Jay Schrader, who's the guy that created the ARPWave POV, or the performance trainer, has basically just his POV training protocols, and that's all they do. Like, he'll train sprinters without sprinting and doing any sports. It's crazy. Like, it sounds like nutty, but at some point he has them go out and sprint a little bit to get the motor pattern down.
Well, I think you would have to, without, you're missing that load component and the ground reaction force,
Exactly.
all those things that translate to other adaptations of.
That's my question too.
Bone mineral density and things like that I don't think you could simulate with electrical stimulation.
It seems to be with like everything, and I know from what you've told me and what I've heard, like the guy that works with hockey, Jim, is a big postural restoration guy, which I've found very helpful in some instances. But like when they came down, I was like Kansas and talked to us. It's like, we fixed this and that and the other thing, and then we decreased 40 times, and it's one of those like if it was that good for everyone, when everyone have finally jumped in, and that's where I always kind of get my hang up on, like, this ARPWave sounds fantastic, but do you put all your eggs in one basket?
No,
Like, I don't think you can, or else everybody in the country and the world would have one of these things. Like, I want to buy this laser. They're expensive, but if they fixed everything, then everybody would have one.
Exactly. And that's where I was kind of torn too, because I was like, oh no, I just spent like 7 years in school learning about training, and now none of it's
that was going to be one of my questions from your traditional,
and like, when I got,
education to.
When I got back from training, ARPWave training, I was like, oh my god, like I was in such a funk. I was like, well, I don't know what to train for now. Like, what do I do? Like, do I just zap myself every day?
I had that same thing with ART. I went to the course for the lower extremity. Was working with track and field, came back, clearing my injury report off. I can fix anything. Fixed a bunch of people, didn't fix some of the other ones. Like, they still were hurt. It didn't matter if you did it flawlessly. Like, it still didn't completely fix it. Like, ART doesn't cure cancer, so we got to use other things.
And it's always going to be like that. I don't think there's ever going to be a end-all cure-all. So it's just another tool in the toolbox, but it's probably one of our more substantial tools.
There's always to be able to combine those two backgrounds too. I mean,
that's the biggest thing. I mean, anybody could do this. I've gotten that question before. Well, why doesn't everybody do this? Well, not everybody. You have to have the knowledge of movement patterns. You have to know like what looks good. You have to know what's like wrong, and be able to have some sort of diagnostic. I'm no like athletic trainer, chiropractor, or anything, but I, understand movement patterns, and that's all you really have to do to be able to do this kind of work.
And I would imagine for general population, have those nagging issues and chronic injuries. Like, that's a great training tool, because that's probably where a lot of their issues are coming from. Those hot spots.
Exactly.
The movement compensation patterns over multiple years just takes its toll.
And I mean, there's gonna be instances where they need, when they need surgery. But I mean, there's been stories of clinics being able to rehab ACLs without surgery, because, like we were kind of talking about before, with the current of injury and the electromagnetism of tissues, it basically assists. Like, if you have, I don't know if it was a partial tear or full tear, but let's just say it's a partial, just because that's most likely.
Reconnect.
But basically, it accelerates the fusion of
Right.
the corresponding tissues, and I mean, theoretically, maybe you could do that in a full tear. I don't know, but
I know
that's
I've
the
seen a
theory
couple
behind
things that, depending on it, that's probably gonna be too far apart. But I saw it was probably a year ago. They're now looking, instead of actually having to like change out or put in the patellar tendon or
Yeah.
the hamstring tendon, almost making a graft
Mhm.
that will reconnect it and then allow the body to regrow
Yeah,
from the two ends. But
Mhm.
if they're fully torn, it's almost too far apart.
yeah,
Because I know that was a lot what they talked about in the Body Electric book is
Mhm.
a lot of looking at like salamanders and
Yeah.
the things that can actually regrow
yep.
limbs and how that's even feasible.
But
It's a
with
little dense, but it is
Yeah.
kind of interesting.
it's really interesting, and I guess the biggest thing that I took away from it, if I could pick out one part from that book, would be how each area of the body has its own sort of specific electromagnetic force or pull. And that was illustrated in their example when they took a salamander, cut off its back leg on its right side, cut off its front leg on its right side, and they switched the legs. And the back leg that was attached to the front became a front leg in structure,
Mhm.
and the front leg attached to the back became a back leg in structure. So basically, and I'm assuming it's somewhere, some sort of gene or something that basically it recognizes, so it basically just gets expressed slightly differently than it was previously. And that's how I would basically assume the ACL.
Right.
It just recognizes the right pattern based
Yep.
upon its electromagnetic pull. That's how I would understand it, at least.
It's pretty sweet stuff,
Yeah,
though.
pretty cool.
Yeah, the thought of it's pretty
Those
cool.
guys are geniuses. But
Yeah.
yeah, that leads us into my other training too. We incorporate basically. I'm going to be working mostly with like high school athletes and probably not a lot of college players because I mean they have their own thing.
Yeah, it's
but
kind of hard to
gonna
pull
be,
them out of what they already
Yeah.
have. Yeah,
We might just be like an outsourcing thing. I mean,
off-season stuff sometimes for sure.
but then like a lot of former Badgers being in the Madison area might are going to come back. Like John works on a few of the former Badger hockey players who are now in the NHL and stuff. So they might come back and work with us and things like that. But yeah, I mean that's pretty much how we incorporate ArcWave into our system.
Awesome.
So when someone just walks in the door and is looking for help, whether it's from a therapeutic standpoint, do they undergo like an initial assessment
Yep.
by you and then kind of get addressed with different people depending on what their needs are?
Yeah. So the way we would ideally have it is they would sign on for like a package or whatever with me and John. John would do all the more of a full body approach.
Michaela gets left out again.
Yeah. Yeah. And John would do kind of the full body approach, address the fascial adhesions and stuff like that, and the structural alignment of the spine and other joints. And then I would come in with a more neurological approach. So we kind of feel like we have a fairly comprehensive system in place. Obviously, when Michaela finishes her dietetics degree, she'll incorporate nutrition and stuff like that, which will further accelerate the process. So they reduce inflammation and things like that. But yeah, if someone just walks in, they get basically a free first session because typically they're skeptical. It just seems like, oh, this is some food box.
Yeah. Can
So
imagine that.
we offer it to them for free, and it's just like, hey, we'll prove it to you. And they walk out of here. Like I had, me and John went down to Broadhead, and this guy's got a jiu-jitsu gym down there, and he was telling me like 7 or 8 years ago he got put in some sort of move, I don't know, and it like ripped some sort of pulled a muscle in his shoulder or something, and since then he's never been able to lift his arm past above his shoulder. Within the first treatment, after I took everything off, he could go like around like normal, and just because he had so much inhibition in the cuff muscles and things like that, we just were able to reactivate him. He's like, oh my god. So like that gets the buy-in. It's just kind of the seeing is believing type of thing.
Have you done anything or with like muscle activation technique, MAT?
No, but I've looked into it before.
Yeah, me too, several times. Except it's really expensive
Yeah.
and long duration to learn. But
Yeah.
just some of the stuff as I was reading, even through like the isometrics and some of that stuff, reminded me of MAT, and just wondered if that was something that you had looked into.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to do that stuff, but at this point, it's just like you said, expensive and time consuming.
It's a business write-off for you now.
Yeah, that's true. But,
Cool. Well, I think let's take another break here real quick and get everything reset, and we'll be back after that.
Sounds good.
Okay, we're back. We're gonna hit into our kind of final section. I think Dan's gonna talk more about some of the other training things, and then we'll jump into the clinically pressed questions and go from there. So, yeah, talk about some of the other crazy stuff that you do.
Well, it's not quite as crazy as the arc wave, I suppose, but
Non-traditional, maybe is a
non-traditional,
better.
yeah. So a lot of the stuff I have to credit Jim Snyder and the guys at Wisconsin, Eric Hilland, kind of introducing me to this. I guess we can just go in order here. The first thing they introduced me to, I guess not the first, one of the most crazy things they introduced me to is the Michael Yes's program called the 1x20 RM method.
Yeah, I was looking into that. It seemed
Yeah.
very interesting and actually made me reconsider some of the stuff we've been doing.
It's nuts. It really is. There's a book on it actually.
Just added it to my Amazon wish list.
Yep. It's literally called the Revolutionary 1x20 RM program, and I didn't believe it at all at first. I thought it was a bunch of BS. Michael Yes is a very smart, renowned guy,
Oh, yeah,
so there had to be
absolutely.
some credibility to it. They've been talking to me about this. I didn't really get it. They didn't really get it that much. But then the whitewater strength coach actually came up and gave a little like lunch and learn type of thing to us. We're just hanging out, talking shop. He's telling me how this is all I do. I was like, no way, like come on.
National champs.
Yeah,
This is how you guys
that's-
train.
Like and
This would be a G-Dope question, and I've really thought about asking him. I really want to know his thoughts on it.
I do too, but I'm scared.
Since we've shifted over, he's been helping us out a lot this year
Oh, cool.
because of everything, and so we've
Yeah.
gone to the Exos style, trying
Yeah.
to work everything in. It's been very helpful, and our guys have gotten benefit from it. But now, after kind of seeing this, I was like, I wonder what he thinks.
So originally, Dr. Yes has created this program as a beginner program. It's simple, easy to do. You don't do a whole lot of heavy weight, really at all, relatively, but yet it's very effective. And the way it works is you select anywhere from 15 to 25 or 30 exercises, depending on how many extra little things you want to do. You kind of hit the main ones, so you do a squat pattern, horizontal push like a bench pattern, horizontal pull, like a posterior chain deadlift RDL type. Good morning maybe. Like a pull down, vertical pull, vertical push, bicep, tricep, lateral raise, with shoulders. You do a lunge. And you don't have to stick exactly to that. I'm sure Yesus would disagree, but I throw in like an actual like a glute bridge, like a barbell hip thruster.
Yep.
Leg extension, leg curl. He's big into his active core, so with his hip flexion, leg extension on those like elastic band type of things, adduction, abduction, calf raise. Really, you're just trying to hit every joint in the body. But you only do it one set, and you do it for 20 reps. And my understanding and the way that I apply it is that 20 reps is like the gold standard number. But if you're trying to fall within the range of 18 to 22.
Okay, I was gonna say, is that trying to fatigue out at 20 or?
Yep.
Okay.
So 20 is just kind of like gives you the rough, like you tell the person, okay, do a weight you can do 20 times only. If they fall short, they get 18. They stay there until the next workout. If they get past that, 22 or more maybe, then they bump up weight the very next workout.
Right.
So it's like this continual revolving thing, and it's really crazy because you can add weight, you get stronger every single day. You're adding 5 pounds every time.
So are you doing this every single day, or like how many days a week is this?
Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So 3 days a week.
Okay. All I see with this is
Right.
gray shirts.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was my initial thought on it.
Yep.
Okay.
And really what it's doing, it's low dosing, so you're not overstressing them. That's the biggest thing in my opinion. A lot of programs like 5-3-1 or whatever, you get hammered,
Yeah.
You're doing 5-3-1 for 4 years as a football player, you got all this stuff. It's just very, very intense and taxing on your nervous system. You only have so much room to adapt. This is slowly building your capacity, and not even that slowly. Like, I know it's 20 reps and it's easier to put on 5 pounds on a 20 RM than it is for a 1 RM. but still, you're increasing that capacity, and there's videos of guys from Whitewater cranking out, I think 305 or whatever on back squat for 20 reps. I mean, that's mental. Like, that's crazy. And
We need some of that.
yeah, and when you think about it from like a metabolic or a molecular standpoint, what you're doing is you're going to produce a lot of lactate. That's basically about almost a minute under tension, especially with the compound movements. The bicep curls maybe not, but and what that does is going to release a lot of lactate and therefore growth hormone, which stimulates connective tissue. So you're adding a lot of fascia in the right planes, assuming proper range of motion and all that, and not messed up form. You're increasing the connective tissue just amount in that athlete. And this is the main question that I would love any scientist or anybody to be able to answer: is within that connective tissue, can you grow more? Does that come with more muscle spindle, or are you just fixed? Because if you can increase your muscle spindle, then that would potentially explain why these people are increasing their verticals and their explosiveness so much without really doing any true heavy power work. Now, if you were to hook a tendo up to this as well, you would notice that the bar speeds, especially for the first 10 reps or so, are pretty high. In order to do 20 reps, you can't be doing slow weights. That would be you wouldn't be able to do it 20 times. It would have to fall within that 50-60% range, which happens to be what people would say power. So if you're looking on the 10 to 40 to 60, like if you look on what's his name, Brian Mann, he gives like power ranges for 10 units and things like that. That's typically the percentage of the 1RM that falls within that strength, speed, power range, and potentially another explanation of why people's verticals are increasing so much. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head, but I think he's the basketball strength coach at Richmond, and he does this solely. And he notes 10-inch vertical increases in their first year, which is really, which is pretty cool. I believe it's the first year, but he's got
this
graphs
with a BioGrow study.
But it's really impressive, and considering they're not doing the traditional hypertrophy, you're going to get some hypertrophy. You're still activating mTOR and everything like that, but it's not the true 5x5 or whatever, the true optimal zone. You're doing 20 reps. But if you look at that from a week standpoint, you're doing 60 reps a week, roughly 60 reps a week. And the idea is that you would do this until you plateau. The worst part about this is that it's boring. It's really, really boring. So I like to just kind of do a month of it and then switch.
Yeah, makes sense.
But there's a progression. So it's 1x20, and then the next block or phase, whatever you decide to do, whether it's in the next month or when they plateau, you switch down to 1x14. Same exact thing. Now you don't have to 1x14 for every movement. I would do it for maybe like the compound movements, the prime movements. You could keep the buys and the shoulder exercises high volume if you wanted to. Those you're not really trying to go up in every single one. You're not gonna be able to do scarecrows and increasing 5 pounds a week. You know what I mean?
Be all good to throw up 80s doing those.
The
ultimate bro workout.
The main movements, the compound multi-muscle group movements, are the ones that you're going to see those increases on. And then once you're done with 1x14, you go to 1x8. And the true 1x20 program, you would just revolve through that. You just keep going and going, year in and year out. Because then once you get into 1x8, now you're hammering pretty heavy weights, and then you're going to carry that neural strength back through 1x20 again, and you're just going to continually bump up each time through.
Yeah, makes sense.
That's how these guys are getting up to 305 for 20 reps. And we're talking about that's an enormous capacity. So then, let's just say you plateau. Maybe this stops working after a few years. Theoretically, maybe it never does stop working. You just have slow progress at some point. You're not just going to, never slow down. But that's when you would come back with more of the 5RMs, 3RM, 1RM type workouts. And now you have this huge connective tissue, muscular foundation. You haven't even tapped your nervous system out yet. You're still, in strength / power endurance zones. And you have, it's like having, someone start off with a 400-pound squat that's never trained on the nerve, so to speak,
Right, right.
before. I mean, that would be that. Now you're talking. By the time maybe they're a senior, now you're throwing up 600 pounds regularly. So who knows? I don't know how it would have come out.
Interesting.
Everyone's gonna be different, but that's the theory behind it. And then they slowly incorporate speed and plyos and
For
stuff
sure.
like that. They keep those fairly low in volume each day, just right before the workout, and then that's it. That's basically the way it works.
So
Maybe
how long do those workouts last? I'm just
an hour.
doing the math in my head.
I-
They still come out to around an hour.
Yeah, at the most. I mean, once they get the hang of it, you don't have to coach as much. Then 45 minutes.
Even to do 20 calf raises.
Right. That's
Yeah.
Was even weighted isn't going to take you forever.
Right.
Yeah, a minute
It's-
really.
Yeah, some of those simple abduction exercises shouldn't take you too long.
Yeah, and it's
Every
it's
set of
awesome
reps.
for athletes because you're working in multiple planes. I think Dr. White would really like that because he was always stressing like things from my coach and things like that.
Yeah,
where they would
yeah.
have all these rotational ab works and pulls.
So much fun to teach our football guys how to do that. It's been an interesting.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you can create strength in these little movements, like if you're doing like a back raise, and your feet are in a glute ham, but you extend up and you're rotating both ways. I mean, all that stuff's very sports specific, and if
For
you
sure.
can, not have these big power lifters out on the field and move like blocks,
Right.
That's going to carry over into increased athleticism alone.
Use a couple of those guys right now.
So
Powerlifting size guys.
yeah, and then another thing I picked up from Jim Snyder was he introduced me to these extreme isometrics.
Okay.
And really, I just thought it was cool. Like at first, I didn't really get it. Then he's like, no, I'm restructured, and hockey players especially, they're constantly pushing laterally. When they flex their hip, their knee comes outside of their body, like laterally. They can't.
Yeah,
they don't like to recruit that through that psoas. They use kind of that TFL or whatever area. Can't remember my anatomy very well, but that's essentially they're pulling through there more than straight in front of them. So they when they would go into sprinting, it would be terrible.
I
It's
can
just
imagine.
like waddling,
Watching hockey players.
Adductors just over
And
taxed. Yep.
I'll come back to this later, but sprinting, I think we can all agree is a very, very important thing to do no matter what your sport is. So he wants to train them to do sprints, hill sprints, all sorts of things like that in the off season. Well, if they start running and waddling around, they're just going to get hurt.
For sure.
So he implemented these extreme isometrics to kind of re-groove the proper motor pattern. And that's all I thought. That's when I looked at it, I was like, oh, he's just teaching them how to be in perfect form, essentially, no matter what movement they're doing. And basically the extreme isos he would use is the split squat. That's the one he did the true extreme isos on. He did some other eccentric and isometric holds with push-up and some other things like that.
Split squats would make sense for the
Yeah,
hockey guys,
exactly.
especially to retrain.
And that's one
Putting
of the
them in the right position.
Yeah, but if you're Jay Schrader, he uses the split squat / wall squat depending on your ability. The push up, the pull up hold. You would progress from push up to dip at some point, but that's very, very hard. And I think that there might be another one I'm forgetting, but that's essentially it. Basically, just trying to re-grease the groove and establish that motor patterning again. And then Jim brought to my attention as well that I'm not just adjusting the nervous system, the recruitment pattern. They would get up to 3-4 minutes in a split squat hold, and they're trying to. The difference is they're not trying to resist gravity. They're trying to pull themselves down. So they're trying to pull their hips to the ground. Contract, like on the front leg, you'd be trying to squeeze your hamstring rather than push away from the ground. You're trying to pull yourself to the ground. The back leg's trying to push backwards, like you would be trying to push up in
into
a
the
run.
wall.
Exactly. Not trying to extend the quad like most people feel that quad tension when they do split squats. So that creates it's basically a very, very slow eccentric. It's not really isometric. You're actually lengthening slowly. You're just trying to grip on and hold.
Sure.
And as fatigue sets in, you get lower and lower. And the tension that you create obviously produces some level of strength. You get some of that size principle theory in there. Like you're starting off just at low threshold motor units. As those drop out, you're increasing higher and higher, and then you start burning more and more, getting some of that lactate, connective tissue put in place. Plus the amount of time I'm I believe it takes roughly 3, 4, or 5 minutes to adjust the fascia of constant pressure. So you're getting fascial adjustments as well. Especially when you can get up into those longer
For
holds. Maybe, right away you might only start off at like a minute or 2 minutes. Well, in time, it's a very, very rapid adaptation. And these guys, they're great athletes to begin with, but I would be timing them. They'd be getting almost to 4 minutes within a couple weeks, and that's substantial. I mean, if you'll see it, the blood flow. It's like occlusion training. So there's a lot of effects of occlusion training. The blood flow literally gets choked off from about mid thigh down. Their leg turns purple almost, and it's crazy. And if you look at all the benefits from occlusion training, it activates high threshold motor units to a higher degree, and produces satellite cells more in those areas of the occlusion. So you're going to build more muscle that way too. I wrote a little paper about it before, but I can't remember everything in it. But there's a lot of benefits to occlusion training.
If you find that, send it to me. We can link it up.
Yeah, especially from a rehab standpoint. That's how it kind of all started with the blood pressure cuffs and everything like that.
Yeah, we use a little bit of that with those voodoo bands.
Yeah.
We do some minor things with that, and just try different things. And we've always joked about doing occlusion training up in the SPC because it's something that you've always been kind of interested in.
A couple
research
football studies that have come out showing they use it in off-season training programs.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can train at low loads, kind of some of the stuff you're talking about earlier, but still get the benefits of
It's
higher load, higher volume work.
Exactly. So that's how I first got introduced to it, and then I tried out more like the true protocol for it, and the results are pretty amazing. You're supposed to get up to a very, very high level before, like if you were to follow Jay Schrader's strict program, apparently you do extreme isos for like a year.
No thanks.
Yeah. So, but you get up to the point where you got 40 pounds on your back and you're holding a push-up hold for like 5 minutes straight.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like I couldn't imagine doing that or convincing any of my clients to stick with me while they go through that. But if it works, it works. Cool. But anecdotally, like as I said, I'm not a scientist or anything, so I can't really publish anything. But Michaela and I were monkeying around with these last fall, and we did them for a month. And Michaela is about 5'11". She's very tall and lanky. She's got longer arms than I do. So in her push-ups, she just struggles from a biomechanical leverage standpoint. And she can do push-ups, but they're always just kind of those grinded out, kind of not real, poppy push-ups. And if I had her line up in that perfect push-up position, maybe 5 perfect ones, then it'll kind of start to get crap. Maybe not even that. And we did a month of just iso holds, and she didn't even do it from her toes. She was doing it on an incline, like onto a chair from her knees. And she built up, I think maybe her top consecutive time was 3.5 minutes or so. And then a month later, we just kind of post-tested, and she could rip off like 10 or 15 perfect push-ups. Boom,
nice.
boom, boom, boom. That's a substantial gain, and she didn't even get to the 5-minute mark.
Right.
She wasn't even on her feet; she was on her knees. So it's a substantial increase in strength. You get those neural adaptations as well, size principle, increased recruitment. I'm sure you probably get some sort of rate coding improvements in there as well, just because you're taking it to failure. That's what I now prelude the 1x20 program with, so I can establish proper function first, like motor learning first. That's mainly what I use it for. I don't care so much about the strength gains. Anything that I get is kind of just bonus.
For sure.
But then when I go into 1x20, they're ready to go. I don't have to coach them much. Like my clients have seen some pretty good improvements. So the last 3 weeks, one of my clients put on I think 25 or 30 pounds onto his front squat and just on his 20 RM, which is pretty good.
Nice.
And he's still going. He's not slowing down. That's a nice thing. We also incorporate some flywheel inertial training.
Want to keep this one the Twitter version so we can move on to
Sure. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Since we're running out of time, I know you got stuff and we've got stuff, so
which is kind of combined with our eccentric overload training. Eccentric overload. The reason why I'm interested in doing that is because it promotes fast twitch 2x fiber type conversion. So most weight training, you'll see power and speed gains from the neural aspect and muscular size aspect up to a certain point. But most people don't get much faster at a certain point. That's because traditional weight training converts you down to a 2A twitch speed, which is fast, but not, you're never going to run a 4.3 with that. The thing about eccentric overload training, whether it's from a speed overload or a load overload, like you would see weight releasers or whatever, it converts it to a 2x isoform, so you get a faster, powerful muscle isoform. And we use our flywheel, our VersaPulley for that, because it's simple. We don't need weight releasers. All we do is the 2-1 technique. So we would do like a deadlift up into a single leg RDL down to control it, to promote that overload, because there's no way.
Makes sense.
Because then if you try to do like a single leg RDL, it has a power reader on there and it tells you what your output was. And then obviously if you're producing more output with 2 legs than you could with 1, obviously, and then you control it on 1 leg down, you're getting eccentric overload of that leg. So that'll promote some fast twitch fiber conversion rate. And that's basically, kind of our outside the box. We do a lot of other traditional things. We don't just do all that stuff, but
Sounds good.
Can't
Throw away that 7 years of school.
No, like anything else, you just those are just tools in the toolbox.
For sure.
You throw in at time to time, and we use traditional methods as well as a foundational part of our program. So that's that.
Well, these are the 4 questions now that we ask everybody. So we always like to finish up with those. First one is like we said, we kind of covered most of these probably already, but what would be something, maybe just one thing that you believe that a lot of others may not?
I kind of touched on this earlier. I think that from a training aspect, everyone needs to sprint. I think it's the most functional human movement you can possibly do. You can, if you look at the power aspects of speed, sprinters or Olympic weightlifters or power lifters, who's the most explosive? Obviously a sprinter. Olympic lifters are a close second, but it's very hard to make a sprinter out of an Olympic weightlifter, or even harder to make a sprinter out of a power lifter. But you can go the opposite direction much easier. That's because sprinting and explosive work, such as sprinting, ballistic movements, make those high threshold motor units easier to recruit. So that's why sprinters never squat a day in their life will walk in the first day, I threw up 315. That's not much, but for never squatting
for never having picked up a bar, for sure.
That's pretty impressive, especially when they're $170. It's like, what the heck? So that's why I think everyone needs to sprint year round, from day one of their athletic development, middle school on. Just sprint, run track, do whatever you got to do, but got to sprint. Secondly, honestly, throughout school and my internships, I have met a lot of very smart people, smarter than I am. And the more I've learned, the more I've learned from a school standpoint or an education standpoint, the more I realize that I don't know. The more of this science, like I'm reading this molecular exercise physics book right now, and the more I learn about that, I'm like, oh my God.
Some light reading.
Yeah. The more I read about that, half the stuff goes over my head, but the more I read and the more I learn, the more I realize I don't know.
For sure.
And the more people that tell you, oh, that's BS, or they have so much black and white and, hard facts and things like that, the more it's just kind of, well, they just don't, they're just trying to beat home their own training methods. And I just think, and that leads me to my third point, is that you need to always critically think, question everything, but don't be, self-righteous and cynical about it,
For sure.
Kind of have the mindset of just being an open book and, share information. Don't be an information hoarder like you guys. You guys are trying to, share information, spread the wealth a little bit. Don't be one of those people who just tries to.
Oh, really? It's
console.
you sharing the wealth. We're just sitting here listening to you. So
yeah,
we got the easy part of the job. So.
Yeah, but I mean that's just what I'm trying to do.
I
believe
absolutely.
in kind of benefiting the greater good, not just trying to advance my own practice. And I think if everyone kind of could do that, we would be much, much better off as a whole. So yeah.
Cool. Most influential, and we use the term loosely, fitness purchase. It could be anything tied to it, but we could make that huge for under $100.
God, I don't know if it's under $100.
Yeah.
Or close.
You got some expensive toys.
$150.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't think the ARP counts.
No,
that would be
no,
the
no.
only thing that we say doesn't count.
Honestly, it's old school and people hate on it, but my favorite piece of equipment is the trap bar. I think it's the most functional thing you can do from a loading standpoint. every time I do it, I jump higher and run faster.
And by trap bar, are we talking
the hex bar?
The hex
yeah,
bar,
you
okay.
stand in. I just think the way it loads you, kind of like from the anterior to posterior standpoint, it's just right in line with that.
Yep.
The curve of that, the force curve of your body when you're standing up or jumping. It's not too dominant, for the posterior chain or too dominant anterior chain. I think it's just perfect from a biomechanical standpoint. And I'll throw a second one in there because I didn't know if you wanted equipment or a book.
Either one, and or.
Really, the thing that kind of sent me over the edge, I was, for a while there, I always kind of wondered, should I try to pursue a PhD and study all this stuff, or should I just, I don't know. But it's a book called Molecular Exercise Physiology. Sorry, I'll speak in the mic. Molecular Exercise Physiology by Henning Wackeridge. It's not super in depth, but he talks just about some basic molecular and genetic pathways, and really that sparked my interest into all this stuff. And there's more advanced books out there, and this is, I don't want to say it's a light read, but it's not a difficult read by any means.
It says an introduction, so that gives me
it's got stuff about nutrition and different sorts of signaling for endurance and weight training, things like that. It's really cool. And ever since then, I've just kind of been on like a binge of reading as much research about it all as I can.
Awesome.
And yeah, those are my 2 recommendations.
So, and then the last one, and before we go and kind of wrap it up, yeah, you probably kind of touched on this too. Like, what would you tell yourself in both your training and your education if you could go back 5, 10 years?
Yeah. For training, I would have said, don't play on injuries. Hey, stupid, your foot's broken. Don't play on it. That would have saved me a lot of agony, but who knows? Maybe I never would have gotten into this field.
There you go.
Whatever. I mean, it kind of led me as one of my little stepping stone things. And from an education standpoint, I would say, because I'm still trying to go back and get that PhD, but I got to take some prereqs for it, is take a hard science. Like, I took some, but like I have to get through organic chemistry, biochemistry to get into the program I want to, and I never had to take those as a fitness or ESS undergrad, so it's like, it would just, as much as it would suck, and as much as you don't understand what's going on when you're an undergrad, it's going to help you out with understanding of how everything else works from a training, nutrition standpoint. As Dr. Jagam and I talked about earlier, if you're trying to look up some supplement or something like that, you would literally understand the mechanism behind it. So without that, it's just kind of like that you're bordering on that bro science line, So
Rep for Jesus.
Yeah. So yeah, that's all I got.
All right.
Awesome.
So just kind of in closing, where can people find you? Where should they find you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? Whatever, plug whatever you want to plug.
Well, we're Madison Human Performance. We are in Middleton, Wisconsin, which is a suburb of Madison. 3510 Parmenter Street. You can reach me at 608-225-5465. Or email me, dant@madisonhumanperformance.com.
We'll link all that up for you.
Yeah, and we're open. We're open by appointment, so I guess you can try to catch us when we're here, but sometimes we do things on the road, so we're not always in the office. So we set things up by appointment. Training, therapy, nutrition. That's basically our gig.
Awesome. Well, thanks, man. This has been great.
Cool. Thank you guys.
A lot of information, so
Appreciate
it should be a fun one.
Cool.
All right. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. We hope you enjoyed it. Please check us out at clinicallypressed.com or on almost any social media site, Facebook, Twitter, and even Instagram. As always, go to our website, check it out. Leave any ideas for episodes. We're always open to trying new things and interviewing new people. And also sign up for the weekly TAT newsletter for free when you go onto the site. Thank you, and we hope you enjoyed this episode.